Hi, I'm Joseph Wise, and welcome to The Modern Plague. Pornography has caused a lot of damage in our world. It has harmed individuals and families, ruined relationships, and even our sexual identity. But God's healing touch is greater than any damage that the devil may throw at us. And we have with us once again, Alex and Francis. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome. It's really great to have you guys. We also have with us Father Ed Broom, who provided for us a talk about the damage that pornography causes all of us. And we're going to watch it and bring it into a group discussion. So let's have a look.
We're talking about the dangers of pornography. It's the ravenous wolf that is trying to devour humanity. What does the Bible say about this topic? There's a passage in the Old Testament where King David gets up from a long siesta and he lifts up his eyes and he sees a beautiful woman that's bathing. It's Bathsheba. What does he do? He looks at this woman with lust. He desires her in his heart. He ends up by committing adultery with her. The importance of the eyes. The eyes are the mirror of the soul. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 8, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God." We also see in the book of Daniel a beautiful woman, the chaste Susanna. And we see the elders who are spying her, looking at her through the gates. They lusted after her, and they wanted to commit adultery with her. And she rejected the advances of this man. Once again, it's the use of the eyes. The eyes are the mirror of the soul. And Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes, once again reminds us, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God." Also, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says this, "You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery against her." And Jesus is pretty strong. He says that if your eye is an occasion of sin to you, pluck it out. Better for you to enter into eternal life with one eye than to be cast into Gehenna with two eyes. What Jesus was warning us of 2,000 years ago is the danger of the abuse of our eyes. I'd like to tell another story. This happened about 110 years ago in Italy. And it's the story of Saint Maria Goretti, virgin martyr. Saint Maria Goretti came from a very poor family, and they had to share a room with another family, father and son. The name of the boy was Alessandro Serenelli. He was 18, Maria was 11. And at first, the relationship between the Serenelli family and the Goretti family was harmonious, both hardworking. But Alessandro, somewhat like Ted Bundy, fell upon some bad images. And then what happened is, he looked at these images and he transferred these images to the young and beautiful Maria Goretti. And he had made advances. And every time he made advance, Maria Goretti would rebuff him, would push him off. But the day arrived where Maria Goretti was watching over her little sister in the house, and Alessandro came in from the fields like a wild animal. He tried to force himself upon Maria Goretti, and she pushed him, rebuffed him, and said, "No, this is a mortal sin, and if we do this, we could go to hell." He pulled out a ice pick, which was like a knife, stabbed her 11 times in her front, then stabbed her another 3 times in her back. We know the story of Maria Goretti, that she forgives this man before she dies. He's thrown in prison, and she appears to him and says, look, God has forgiven you, I forgive you, you ask for forgiveness. He asked for forgiveness. He was let out of prison, entered into a Franciscan monastery, lived a holy life. And in 1950, Maria Goretti was canonized by Pope Pius XII as the patron saint of purity as well as of the young people. We have a certain parallel here between the Ted Bundy case and the Maria Goretti case. And what is it? It's the reality of pornography. So the rest of the presentation, this segment, we're going to talk about what are the effects of pornography. One occasion there was a hardened gang member that went through a radical conversion. He was able to leave the gang. He was able to leave drinking. He was able to leave his drug addiction, but with tears in his eyes. He said no matter how hard he tried, he could not break from the slavery of the addiction to pornography. So that's one of the effects, is that pornography is a modern drug. Studies have indicated that pornography is more powerfully addictive than cocaine. It's lethal. It's binding. So we have to recognize the real lethal, the noxious, the poison effect of pornography on the human person. Let's go through some of the other negative effects. As mentioned earlier, the person that looks at pornography, especially the man that looks at pornography, is no longer going to look at the woman as created in the image and likeness of God. No longer look at the woman as a daughter of God the Father, as a sister of Jesus Christ, as a temple of the Blessed Trinity, but simply as an object that can be utilized at will. So it changes the whole perspective of the human person. There's also been a very serious study that was done at Harvard a few years back that shows the escalating effect of pornography. Pornography often starts by seeing an image, sometimes even by mistake. 11 or 12-year-old children can sometimes be exposed to this pornography even without being aware. So this seeing pornography by accident can often lead to curiosity, a wanting to go back and see more. And from curiosity to escalation. Escalation means instead of simply looking at a bad picture on the magazine or a bad picture on the internet, it becomes all the more raunchy. See, escalation factor leads to what is called desensitization. Desensitization means the conscience, little by little, is being blurred, is being eroded. What was repulsive before is starting to become even natural. It's like the image of the frog that's put in the bathtub. If you keep heating up the water, the frog is eventually going to die. The frog is not even aware that the temperature is ascending. And after the desensitization, as a moral theologian, the conscience can actually be killed, cauterized, killed. And then you have what is called the acting out on pornography. which leads to other types of sexual sins. So what are some of the other effects? The other effect of pornography is obviously that the man that watches pornography can be falling into the sin of masturbation. Both of them are related. And once that happens, the pleasure that's produced in that act can be so gripping that instead of watching pornography every month, then it becomes every 2 weeks, then every week, and then every day. And before you know it, there's a total addiction to this moral poison. Another effect is that once the person has decided to simply give up the fight, if this person was a practicing Catholic, he'll decide to no longer go and receive the sacraments. And once we have abandoned the sacramental life as Catholic Christians, my friends, it's very, very difficult to overcome any vice, any bad habit whatsoever. Without Jesus, we can do nothing. But Jesus says all things are possible for those who love God. Another effect is the following. Remember reading a book of this man that had an addiction to pornography for many years? And he was watching a football game, and there was a commercial. And during the commercial, he went into his room to look at pornography. And what happened was he forgot to lock the door. And his little daughter entered when he was looking at pornography. And she was shocked. She ran out of the room crying to her mother. And to make a long story short, this man lost his family because of his addiction to pornography. How many families today are being lost because this ravenous wolf that we call pornography is entering in and wreaking havoc, renting asunder families? And it must be said that adultery can be committed in many ways. The most obvious is physical adultery, but also there is adultery of the eyes, the mind, the heart, the emotions. So a married man that has purposely decided to look at pornography, he is breaking his marriage vows because he promised on the day of his wedding, I promise to be faithful to you in good times and bad, in health and sickness, in riches and poverty, until death do we part. So adultery and families are being rent asunder because this ravenous wolf of pornography is entering in and devouring individuals. Last but not least, Our Lady of Fatima, in 1917, she appeared to 3 little children, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia. And Our Lady said these 3 things. Many marriages are not good. She didn't mention this, but one of the reasons why is because of the invasion of the ravenous wolf of pornography. She also said that many modes, ways of dressing will be introduced. They'll be highly offensive to God. And then she also said that most souls are lost for all eternity because of the sins against the 6th and 9th commandment. And these sins are against the virtue of modesty, of purity. So it's very important that we're keenly aware of the deleterious, noxious effects of pornography. Pornography is the ravenous wolf that wants to devour the society, the family, and the individual. So may God bless us and help us to ward off this ravenous wolf that we call pornography.
Wow. This was probably the most darkest part of the three-part talks that we got from Father Ed Broom, which is, of course, the damage that pornography causes to individuals, families, and the overall culture. So, I know for myself, I have several friends who actually identify themselves as bisexual, and it's primarily because they are addicted to pornography. So pornography has just completely damaged the way how they identify their sexuality and how they even identify it when they see other people. And if I know for a fact that if they weren't addicted to it, they wouldn't have that kind of orientation, if you will.
And the confusion, and when you get obsessed and addicted with pornography, you begin to desensitize, and as an individual, you begin to look at the opposite sex as a mere object. And, talking about the damages of pornography, once you objectify someone, they are merely an object. And what happens when you're done with an object? What happens when you get all the use out of an object that you see fit? You discard that object and you move on to the next one and the next one and the next one. And this disease continues and continues, and it infects and it enslaves. And it's a horrible thing.
And not just that, not just the opposite sex or the other person, but also individually. It could create a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. It's most people are aware that that's not a good thing. It's not a healthy habit, and yet because it's so addicting, they keep doing it and keep falling. That automatically becomes a shameful act, and they lose all sense of reality, of truth. They have this perspective truth of how life works. And in most cases, they feel that they're probably the worst person, or their guilt, and it's nothing more than just a fake reality that pornography has drilled, you could say, in their brains, because porn itself is fake. So yeah.
I don't think I know of anyone who has struggled with the addiction of pornography is addicted to pornography, who wants to be addicted to pornography. I don't think anyone does. Even the people who claim that they love it, I don't think anyone wants that. I don't think anyone wants to have that kind of mindset drilled into them, as you put, Alex. And we talked about how it can mess with your mindset and view people as an object. But I think what some of us might not realize is that, pornography in turn also might turn us into feeling like we're also just objects. And it destroys kind of that human dignity that, we're actually made in the image and likeness of God. We're meant for a lot more than that, and it just does away with it.
I have to say my personal story. I was addicted for a few years. Lucky for me, I'm healed. I'm free of that bad habit. God be praised. And you're right. You become an object, and you lose that dignity, because you have a dignity when you're at birth, and you lose it. And it's very depressing to see that, because there's people, you can say that people don't really understand what you're going on through. So it's you lose that sense of identity because of it too.
Once you're addicted to something of that nature, you lose your identity. You lose the ability to find what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And once you lose that, you lose yourself. And it might sound, like we're making this into such a huge deal and such a big deal, when in reality it is huge. It is one of the biggest, most insane plagues out there, because it is a plague. It is something that once you get sucked in, it is one of the most difficult things to get out of. And the sooner that we realize that as a whole, the better. because we need to admit, and there's so many of us out there that can't admit that we have this problem.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's the root cause. That's the biggest issue at hand is being able to admit you have a problem and realizing where you're at and what you need to do to overcome that, because no good comes out of it. There is no good. Anyone that partakes in that feels horrible. Yeah. They do, and they won't admit it, but they do.
And actually, a thought on that, and not just the person who's addicted actually is the one that's suffering too. Person doesn't have to necessarily be addicted to this type of thing. There's those who are not. I mean, but that doesn't mean it's still very bad, because how empty does that person have to be to see that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and it's not just that. It's the same thing with those people who are actually part of this industry.
Yes, and I was, thank you for bringing that up, Alex, because from my perspective, I don't think anything that has to do with pornography is without victims. Everyone's a victim if they're involved in pornography. That includes the people who are, who are on, the television or the computer, the person watching, the people who live with the person watching, and even the producers. This is, an activity, a medium, whatever you want to call it, that leaves everyone as a victim.
Yeah.
And, I think that is, ultimately the devil's calling card when you can take a look at what just happened and just say, wow, everyone is hit.
Yep.
Yeah, right now that you're saying that, actually, last year I went to a parish near my house. They actually brought this old porn producer. He would did that, and he's a convert now. I think his family was destroyed because of that. But he said something. He said, if those people who are judging me for what I did, but if you've seen it, you're as part as the problem as I was. Because in pornography, there's abuse. There's a lot of exploitation. Those people who are performing, most of them are in drugs. Most of them are they can be part of the sex trafficking. So we are becoming witnesses to crimes like that too. So we're as guilty. I could say that I was as guilty as any other person out there. So this is a big problem.
Well, this has been I think the heaviest part of this three-part piece with Father Ed Broom, but the good news is that the upcoming episode will encompass how to be healed from pornography, so that will probably be a much, much lighter piece. But for now, we gotta put it right there. So for Alex and Francis, thank you guys so much. And thank you all at home also for watching. This is the part 2 of the three-part series with Father Ed Broom. And this pornography really is I dare say a crime that leaves everyone as the victim. But the good news is that there is no amount of darkness that Christ cannot illuminate with his light, which is love. And moving forward into part 3, we will be discussing the healing that comes from Jesus Christ for all those who partake in pornography. So until then, stay tuned. There's a much brighter piece coming up. We hope that all of you will be praying for us as we will all be praying for you. Thank you for watching.
Did you like the program you just watched? Help Shalom World bring more programs like this to a global audience. Your support helps us share the peace of Christ with the world. Visit shalomworld.org/donate